Hello and welcome to Chess with Simon. I'm Simon. Today we're going to review the OCA Cowley Blitz tournament, the Oxford Chess Association Cowley Blitz tournament. This was organised by Dave Robson. Ian Bush is the chair, so thank you to both of them. Dave Robson's account is StarBuilder, so since he did all the work, we're going to start with one of his games. So let's see how Dave did. And actually, he played two interesting games against Purplerooks, and we're going to choose one of those two. I want to choose the first one, actually, because it's actually very helpful to me, theoretically. So Dave's black. So let's have a look what happened. Pawn d4, knight f6. So we're sort of heading for a London system type opening here. Bishop f4, solid, sensible, quite popular with the elite at the moment. Dave goes to play g6, which basically says, I want to have an interesting game here. I want to play something interesting, something asymmetric, something a bit, complex perhaps. e3 from white, again, solid and sensible. Complete the fianchetto. Knight d2 is quite common in these systems where you don't yet want to commit whether you're going to play c3 or c4. And d5 from Dave, so you can play d6 in these sort of lines, which sort of blunts the bishop, heading for a King's Indian type setup. Dave has chosen a kind of Grunfeld type setup, or perhaps reverse Catalan type setup, Grunfeld type setup, which I also like, and is very, very sound. d3 is the typical position for the bishop in these lines, although it sometimes comes to e2. Can't come to c4 because it'll be lost. And Dave goes ahead and fianchettos the Queen's bishop, which again is a solid choice. Knight f3, knight gf3, black castles. Now h4. Now h4 here, you can see the logic in this actually, because the Queen's bishop has announced that it's going to the Queen's side. H4 is very trendy at the moment, and just getting a quick attack really down the h file, hoping for h4, h5, bishop h6, an exchange on h6, taking on g6, black takes back, and then checkmate on h7. Okay, you've got to remove the knight on f6 first. But the basic idea is to open the h file, exchange the dark square bishops, eliminate the knight on f6, and then the queen delivers checkmate on h7. That's the sort of broad plan. So Dave's right onto this. Bishop g4 pins the knight, and also, discourages h5 because it covers that square. So basically, black's changed plan. Instead of developing the light square bishop on the queen's side, it's come to the king's side to deal with the emergency that white's h4 move announced. White plays c3, just solidifying the centre, and black plays c5, attacking it. Queen c2 is a common move in these sort of queen's pawn opening, and in the long term, perhaps training sights on h7 with the bishop or the queen afterwards, and maybe the rook if you can open the h file. So black exchanges, and then knight c6. So this is a sensible development of the knight, but it also includes a threat, which we'll see later. Knight e5. Again, that knight was unpinned by the queen move. So the knight's free to do this. Whenever the knight does this, it's getting revenge on the bishop on g4. So this bishop on g4 was pinning the knight, and now the knight then attacks the bishop. It's just quite a common pattern. And sometimes this happens with the bishop taking with check on f7. So the knight is then forking the king and the bishop. So that maneuver wins a pawn and stops the king being able to castle. But that's slightly different. But here, the knight's just attacking the bishop on g4. Black lets this happen. I mean, the bishop is defended by knight f6, and of course the threat here is to take with the knight on d4, and white can't take back because it drops the queen. White's aware of this, moves the queen out of the way. Black then gets the bishop away from the knight, and then white's just going for it on the king's side, just like, okay, let's just attack. So basically, now I suppose my assessment of this instinctively is that the king's in the centre of the board. So this drops a pawn, which isn't a problem in my book, because opening lines in front of the king is probably fine, particularly in these blitz formats. I think what worries me more is that the king's in the middle, and it's quite a long way away from castling because the queen is stopping it castling long. So That would be my concern. We've also got the time signature, so we can actually see how much time people have got, and that's a factor, isn't it, in these blitz games. So these guys are moving quite quickly. They've used, well, less than a minute each. White's used less than half a minute, and we're on move 13. And we're way out of book, as it might be. So black accepts the pawn offer, takes twice there, and then white's played a f3 here, which is a kind of engine move. Black backs off, and maybe just that bishop's quite useful defensively there, and it also is attacking that that white pawn, so it's pretty handy. White sticks the rook on the open file, but already the engine can see trouble ahead, and I would suggest that the trouble really does rest around this exposed king, because although white's got threats, there's lots of vulnerabilities. e6 from black, just giving the queen like a road to h4, for instance, which white blocks with a rook. Black pushes away, and now white's gone ahead and sacked an exchange there. Now, if the queen and the bishop were in a different order, this would be a splendid move, because it would be checkmate on h7 if black takes. Often in chess, you get them in the wrong order, which is kind of annoying, but still, this move, you can understand the logic behind this move. It's basically opening an open file. You know, so if you could beam a major piece onto g1, then bishop takes h6 it is a pin, or is intensifying the pin on the g7 bishop. So you can sort of see what's going on here. Bishop g3 just to defend the that pawn, because the queen would take there with check. And now the queen's coming to a more active position, maybe potentially taking an f3 if that knight moves, just pinning down the white pieces. White defends the pawn. Now e5 just opens the centre, and I think it is a good time to open the centre because the king's in the centre, and you know, black's not too worried about structural. I mean, this gives black an IQP, but who cares? I mean, at the end of the day, it's so sharp that it's not important. So we get exchanges on e5. So now let's just take a quick look at the position, and what we basically see is basically black's an exchange up, and with a safer king. So although white's done a lot to disrupt black's king position, white's own king is looking lonely. Queen g1, you know, just pinning that bishop, it's sensible. And now the dark square bishop's gone, it's a bit less scary. Renewing the attack on h4. Knight comes around, black gets h4. King runs to f1, and then black's put a rook on that open file very sensibly. I mean, rooks belong on open files. That's probably is the rook I would have moved as well. Let's have a quick look at the time. Okay, so white's down to 23 seconds now. So in reality, and this often happens, doesn't it? When you're in a challenging position, you spend some time thinking, and the clock becomes a problem. Knight to e2, just knight to d2, just sort of coming back for defensive duties. Black perhaps looking to double, perhaps looking to go to the g file to hit the queen. And well, with 11 seconds left, unfortunately, white doesn't realise that that rook's not defended twice. The king and the queen don't both defend the rook, because once the king takes, it's over. So look, really good game. I thought it was a really good game because I think white played an ambitious attack and a coherent idea. Probably sacrificed a little too early and probably should have got the king to safety. Black played solidly, sensibly, dealt calmly with the attack, and then I think probably exploited the options once the white king became exposed. So a really good game. After this, we will go on and look at a game by Purplerooks. Purplerooks is Gilbert Csecs from Banbury. So Gilbert, you're next.